I I did like switch different rooms to make this work. Good morning, everybody, and we are live with Zakiya Sankara-Jabar, who joined us this morning. We're having some technical difficulties, so to the people watching and listening and to viewers, I apologize for that. Trying to work it out on my end. It's an interesting point because it's going to come up in this discussion between
Right.
us about broadband. And in my house, I live in an area. I'm outside of the cities. I live in an area where broadband is very spotty and shaky at best, and depending on what room in the house I'm in, depends on how good it's going to be,
Right.
which you might imagine has great implications for things like education uh, and work. Like I'm
Hmm.
working from home, we have kids from home. So,
Yeah.
anyways, good morning. Thank you for joining me, Zaki. I appreciate this.
Good morning. Good morning to your viewers.
Listen, this is what I've got as an issue. We see that President Donald J. Trump is demanding that schools reopen this fall and not just reopen, but be full time in person without a hybrid model of, some online and some in person. He wants everybody back in school full time. I believe that a big part of that push is economic to make sure that people have workers and to make sure that businesses reopen and that businesses are doing okay and the health of businesses. Sounds good in theory to get everybody back to school, I think, for some folks, but not necessarily just for the purpose of getting the economy going back together, because sometimes you're a little bit sloppy if your whole motive is just to get business going and your motive isn't necessarily educational or for the kids or for the family or for safety and health and welfare, whatnot. So I was already writing a piece about reopening schools, basically saying that I'm not eager for it to happen quickly as a parent. As a parent, I'm not like real trusting of the situation and putting my kids into harm's way. And here you came, lo and behold, out of the blue, you wrote this piece. And I was like, what? How is Zakiya like, in favor of this right now? Which I think I can kind of answer that, but I'd rather have you on to talk about it. You wrote this piece basically saying that you think that it is an imperative and that schools are essential and school access to schooling, real schools, is essential. So tell me the beginning of your thinking about, why you come down on that issue. I mean, you come down on that side of no, schools are essential. We should get open, reopen. What's behind your thinking on that?
Absolutely. Thank you, Chris. And as you know, that piece got some mixed reviews, and I'm happy to talk about this issue with you. But it really came from a place of talking to families, talking to people in my own family, friends, relatives, and in my own experience. I have two children who were attending public schools when the pandemic hit. Our school system did roll out the Chromebooks pretty quickly. We live in a community where the school system is what is funded pretty well, and the schools are decent for Black children. I mean, certainly there's no perfect schools, anywhere really for Black children, and so, but even with everything, and I have broadband, I have what I need. My children had what they needed. But unfortunately, my 5-year-old, the virtual learning is just not age appropriate. Come to find out, for most of the kindergartners, most of the time they were not really engaged, right? My son, as I mentioned in the article, required a lot of oversight even when regular school was in. And I had to make sure that even when he was on virtual learning, for example, right now, I'm working from home. I've always worked from home, but he would literally be sitting a couple of seats away from me, like browsing YouTube, right? And not necessarily doing what he needs to do. So, not a lot of learning has taken place for a lot of children. And it's not just poor children or not just children who have not had access to the internet, because there's a lot of children from colleagues that I know in Mississippi. I've done a lot of work with people down in the Mississippi Delta and other parts of the rural parts of the country. I've done work with folks up in West Virginia. Those kids have not learned since March. in the traditional way, right? Parents who are essential workers, right? We have grocery stores that have never closed down, Chris. We have, for the most part, restaurants. Most of them have not necessarily closed down. They've shifted the way they operate. Um, so we have nurses, right? I have a friend down in Alabama who's a nurse. She is obviously on the front lines, essential worker. They don't get an option to say, oh, there's a coronavirus. No, I'm no longer a nurse, can't go to work. No, they're on the front lines of this thing. So her she felt like, wow, my boys who are all in middle school and high school, I'm not there. I'm a single mom. She's a single mom, right? She's not there to give the oversight to make sure that they're learning. And so she feels some ambivalence about her boys not learning while she's at work being a nurse, oftentimes working a 12-hour shift. So there's just a lot of nuances. There's just a lot. I kind of hate that that Donald Trump is in front of this, and like he's the one that's pushing this, and there seems to be an alignment the way that I'm thinking, but I'm not necessarily thinking about it. Well, I guess that I am, because if he's the president and you have these businesses who are not shutting down, you have the rest of the economy that's open. I think we as a community, as the people, needed to be putting pressure on local, state, and the federal government. Education is funded mostly locally. I think we saw a tweet from Arnie Duncan that assured us of that. About 90% of education is really local and state funding. So our advocacy when it comes to our schools don't necessarily sit with Trump. It really sits in our backyards, and we need to be having conversations. For me, I live in Montgomery County, Maryland. We need to be having conversations with our elected school board and our county council. We need to be having conversations with the state Department of Education. And so I believe that there has to be an option for parents and families who need in-person schools. Now, I'm not advocating that we just, do regular school and just send everybody back and there's no protocols, there's no shift in how schooling has been done. That just would be irresponsible. We've seen every other business. I mean, if you're still shopping at the grocery store, it's a different experience, right? You have to go down one aisle. You can only go a certain way. You can only go back a certain way. So schools will have to adjust. And I believe that we have enough creativity in families, together with school leaders and other professionals, to really come up with a way where in school can be an option, is what I'm arguing. It has to be an option. Because for families in Mississippi and for families in West Virginia and for families in other parts of the country who literally have zero access to broadband, so there is no virtual learning happening in huge parts of this country, there has to be an in-person option. Or are we advocating the fact that, well, these kids weren't learning that well anyway in the first place? Oh, well, they can just catch up in 2021. I'm just not sold on that. I'm not of that belief. I'm not willing to give up that for I guess what I'm saying is I think it can be done safely. I do.
Why do you think? Why do you have trust that it can be done safely?
Not that I have trust. We got to fight for it. I mean, we have a tradition of resistance in this country. Black folks have to fight for everything. If we have to choose our fights, do we want to fight for the broadband, or do we want to fight for schools that are sitting there that we already have?
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, we've always.
It does require some degree of like, in the demands that you make, like for the in-person schooling, it'd have to be pretty strong. Right.
Absolutely.
Like for us to have faith and trust in the system enough to give our kids over to the schools. In this situation, we'd have to have some pretty strong demands and some strong signal that they were going to be met. In your piece, you talk about our federal and state governments and our teachers unions are keeping their heads in the sand about the two biggest obstacles to overcome. One of the obstacles was the fiscal crisis schools are facing, which
That's
means
real.
that would correct. And now, on this one, I'm going to have to say, I got to give it to the teachers unions in this way, which, is, listen, mark my words. I give stuff to the teachers unions sometimes. in this case, they are saying, like, listen, the price tag for actually doing this thing right to go back where everybody feels safe and the teachers feel safe and the kids feel safe is going to be pretty big. You have to, the schools do not have the money right now that they would need to go back to school in this fall and do it well. So that would have to come through.
Budgets are
And then
moral documents. We also
yeah,
have a
absolutely.
campaign. We also have a
Absolutely, but
camp.
we're not a moral country. We're not a moral country. So if budgets
Yeah.
are moral documents, it tells us right that you just said it all. That's the end of the story right there. Show's over, folks. Because if budgets are a moral document, we are in a moral society, right? We are a society that consistently steals from the young and gives to the old. We are, we care about the health and the welfare of the old, while the young and the youth are diminishing in returns in terms of their education, their health, their social well-being, all of those things. From the poor to the rich, we get the biblical, the first shall be last, whatever, is exactly the opposite right now in the United States in so many ways. So if budgets are a moral document, and they have been telling us for a long time that we are an immoral country, I'm stringing together some ifs. I'm not making a statement. I'm just saying, then we would need some real strong assurances that there would be a moral change in how we approach the schools for this fall. And right now, the administration is basically saying they're ready to cut funding to schools if schools don't do exactly what they want them to do and comply to the letter of the law that they want them to comply to. They will chop money off in the middle of a damn pandemic. The threat is we will cut money away, which to me, yeah, it leaves me feeling really in a quandary between some people need schools. They need a place for their kids to go. Their kids are falling behind. And we are in such an uncertain situation around the health, and it's being the healthcare of people, the healthcare of the country, and that is being bungled right now. Canada's level of COVID cases and our level of COVID cases are like this. And
Mm-hmm.
they got most things right from the beginning. We got most things wrong from the beginning. And we're expecting like competence to show up at some point. Maybe it will after the election, who knows? But you had a second point. So you had 2 points. One was the fiscal crisis the schools are facing is real. And the second one is the increasing acceptance of virtual learning as a way to avoid making painful but necessary investments in schools. Tell me more about that point.
I think that that's real. I think we're passively accepting virtual learning. And so virtual and online school isn't new. I'm from
Hmm.
Ohio. I lived in Ohio most recently for 20 years before I relocated here to the DC region. And one of the largest schools in Ohio was ECOT, which an online school. It was a charter school. Um, but in Ohio, there was huge fights with this school because of their accountability. Virtual schools, from the certain perspectives, were not as accountable as in-person schools. So we can't suddenly say, right, that virtual learning can replace schooling as we know it in this country. There's a lot of problems with our current education system. And I guess I am just of the belief, we've seen a recent uprising here in this country around racial injustice. The other racial injustice is the years of education malpractice and miseducation that Black children and other children of color currently get in this country. What I think is important is that we marry those two, and there needs to be an uprising in terms of us not accepting just buy a computer, right, and just learn online. That's not a panacea. That's the other piece that I said in the article. That does not work. Um, for a hell of a lot more folks than regular school doesn't work for, right? It impacts the fact that, number one, it's not great for all kids, not even age appropriate for little ones, not at all. And then even for young people who, again, live in places where there's literally no access. I can't stop repeating that. There is no access to broadband and internet. And in some places, you just said, like even where you live, it's spotty, right? We had technical issues getting on it. So yeah, I mean, I'm sorry. I just can't go with that. I think this is the time that we need to be fighting for the education that all children need. And we need to be pushing very hard, like you said, very hard on all of these demands, not just health
Mm-hmm.
demands, but even
Mm-hmm.
curriculum demands. To me, this is the time to hit the gas. We're at a point where we can really
Yeah.
hit the gas, I think, on
Do
what
you
we've been
think that
all working for.
do you think that um, that there are other options that we would consider too? I mean, it sounds like a big part of your pushback is that virtual is not going to be good for everybody. Like
A
learning
lot of
online, and for a lot of folks, that's not going to be the way to go. Um, do you imagine that there are other possibilities of how we mix it up a little bit between in-person, virtual, um, Black homeschooling collaboratives, whatever? Do you see it as a binary between
no.
getting a lot of people? Okay.
Definitely not a
Yeah.
binary. I that's why I said in the beginning we got to get creative.
Mm-hmm.
I certainly see all of everything that you just said as an option. I do think like with homeschooling collaboratives, that's something that needs to be figured out. But how do you figure that out in terms of funding and money when parents are still paying property taxes for the local schools? That's the issue.
Mm-hmm.
to
Mm-hmm.
me to me the school districts are still taxing folks. So parents, that's so we have to figure out how not to be double taxed or triple taxed in some places. This is very complex and it's going to require a lot of creativity
I mean, because
to
basically, I mean, we pay for the schools no matter what. So I think that's kind of what you're getting at, is that we pay for them.
exactly.
So if we did look for some other alternative, we would be double paying for the educational um, um, provisions for our kids in the states. You said we have to get creative. We have to fight because we have to fight for everything. And in this moment right now, there could be a moment to make a bold claim.
Yep.
You have a show later today where you're going to be talking about police-free schools. Um, what would that bold pitch look like in terms of getting our kids back to school, making sure that they're healthy and safe, well supported, and being educated in safe environments? Like, what would be the radical call right now?
So in terms of the whole police free schools movement, we see that, lots of school districts are spending more money on cops than they are on counselors and other kinds of support staff in schools. So just one area, right? So I live in Montgomery County, Maryland, and the price tag for SROs is at $3 million.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a part of the police budget, but it's appropriated from our county council. Um, I think $3 million can be reinvested and go a long way in some of these creative kind of ideas that we're thinking about. If that means, hiring more cleaning or custodial staff in schools to be working. Because right now, I think in my daughter's elementary school, there's only one person or two people at most for a pretty big elementary school. Um, there definitely need to be hiring of more paraprofessionals, possibly more teachers as well. There's just so many different things that we can be doing to divest from criminalizing kids, to investing in actual what real school safety means, and that's through community intervention workers and other. So the other thing about this is that schools have not. I mean, police have not always been in schools. It's a very recent phenomenon within my lifetime, actually. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so that's something that I always think that is important. Like, because some people will just rest on the fact that, well, this is what it's always been, and I don't always think that that's something that, like, that's not a good thing. Just because it's always been this way doesn't mean like we should continue with that if we see that it's not working. you know
I always hate
um,
that as an argument.
I hate that as an argument.
Yeah,
Like, okay, and you're like, what's your point? This is not okay. Anyway,
yeah.
so I think that that's just one area. I think that looking at school budgets individually in different areas, because schools are so local, this is going to have to be a very local response because communities look different, whether it's rural, urban, suburban. I live technically in a suburban community. Um, And so it can't be, I guess what I'm saying is whatever you and I talk about on this show can't be the thing that everybody run out and this is going to create, this is going to have to take local ingenuity. Like there's community activists, there's people, there's experts. There are people that are experts on their own communities and their own lives in every single community. This is going to take literally community, private, public partnerships to figure out. But what I need people to do is to keep the fact that school is essential. We have got to start from that framing. To me, the education of our children is essential. This is not about the economy, right? In some ways it is, because if parents, I mean, in some ways it is, because if parents and families are forced to still work through this pandemic, then we have to have something, we have to educate their children. We can't leave an entire generation of kids just home alone.
No, I think the economic
See, we're having
response is
see
where
this
liberals and
we're
conservatives
having some
and people in the
problems
middle
even hearing
probably
you.
would find common ground. Is one of the Yeah. Well, I mean, the broadband. See, I live out
See, the
out in
broadband.
the boonies. Um, which they're telling me I need to upgrade to a more expensive business form of broadband, and maybe it'll get better. I think we tried that once years ago, and it didn't really work out. But listen, that's a good. I also have the privilege of being able to have my kids home and not be in a rush to get back to school. So we're a privileged family in that we can do those things, and not everybody can do them. And I can be a little bit more cautious and say, like, listen, the United States has just surpassed 3 million coronavirus cases. Our testing systems are incredibly underfunded and poorly done. The chances that we are going to see spikes, we are seeing spikes again in states that are reopening too fast, which means that politics, the political reopenings, and the political fights over reopenings are deadly. They're causing deaths. They're causing people to get sick and die. So this is my government, right? This is my government. This is my president. This is my government. This is how we're handling a national pandemic and crisis. And this is who I'm supposed to turn my children back over to in the fall. Because we're a privileged family in some ways, we get to make the decision whether or not we have to do that. But for many kids and families, that's not going to be a decision. Like, they need to get back in action. And I'm wondering if you think, I've played with the idea of maybe not everybody goes back right away and taxes the systems, right? Because, like, if my kids go back and everybody's kids go back, it creates a strain on the resources in the system. You really now just running segregation schools, like schools where it's just the kids who have parents that aren't as privileged and whatnot. And then we start running segregated schools, even more so than we have right now.
Yeah.
In a way that could be really gross and obvious. I mean, do you think maybe we go back in waves? Like, not everybody goes back at the same time. Maybe the kids who need it first go back first.
I think that's going to have to be an option. Yeah. That's why I say it's going to have to be very local. I think so. Now, if I think about like kids in Dayton, Ohio, right, which is the city is landlocked. It's an urban district. It's a school district where 100% of the children are free and reduced lunch. And I'm thinking about what that looks like there. I'm also thinking about what that looks like in entire school districts in the Mississippi Delta. So how do we do a wave with them? I mean, I'm open to like that kind of creative thing. I think I've heard of some districts saying, the kindergarten through third grade will come the first 3 days of the week, and fourth and fifth grade will come on Thursday and Friday. I mean, people are trying to come up with different things that may work out. It certainly means that, clearly children are, it's just not going to be the same. There's, the education wasn't ideal before. It's certainly going to be worse now, I guess.
I mean, we have to fear the fact that there was creativity needed before. And now there's really creativity needed to be done. Let me ask you about this kind of like, I've seen pictures of what it could look like to get kids back in schools, and they've got these big ass masks on their face, and their desks are all like far apart from each other. Saw
I've
one
seen the ones
where
with the plexiglass around
the plexiglass around just the desk, the
the
person's
desk.
desk or
Yeah.
whatnot. And I've seen those be just just small and discreet around their own desk, and actually tall, clear ones, right? And I just think to myself, like, I know that people need to get back to school, but even those pictures as a parent make me feel like, what kind of dystopian hell am I like sending my kids back into? Even if we do get everything right, it doesn't look like how school should look,
Yeah.
right? Like the health consequences are going to make it so that it's not even fun for kids in some ways. I don't know if that matters, like in the main, because we got to get kids, back together and back to school and everything. But man, it doesn't look good when you see the precautions and the measures that they're taking. There's a couple of comments here. Joy Jones said there's a few comments. Joy Jones says, just listen to Bethune-Cookman University grad Dr. Frederick Ingram, who is the Florida Teachers Union president, say on the Today Show that he isn't willing to let Florida be the petri dish for the nation. I think you're hearing more teachers who are really pushing the idea that, yes, first of all, teachers, I think 100% agree with you. Virtual is not a replacement to them for regular in-person education. So there's agreement
No,
there.
some
100%.
teachers think that. I mean, no, I'm at least the ones on Twitter are fine with that.
Yeah, are fine with.
Virtual.
Oh, with virtual, really? Well, Michelle Johnson says this. She says, teachers don't want to go back to school and they don't want to lose their salaries and benefits. A teachers are using the summer to prep by designing online courses and strengthening their Google Classrooms. C teachers are enjoying their vacation. Schools can open safely for some children. My son heard from one teacher, one administrator during the spring, I'm not buying a lot of this. There are a lot of those. There are too many of those C teachers, the teachers who probably are not wanting to go back full time, not wanting to do full work, want to be paid full salary, and maybe in your case, what you're saying is true, is that many of them are okay with a little bit of virtual rather than going back and being in person.
The
The
master
teachers unions,
the master teachers want to go back, and I'm thinking about my son's AP English teacher has been in touch with us the whole summer. She was organizing the parents even when we were out for the pandemic to push for more adequate learning even in the virtual space. She was pushing. I mean, you and her would probably agree with this, but she was pushing for grades and not just passing kids. She's a master teacher. She's very concerned about the learning of the children. Of course, she's concerned about the health, but she's also concerned about this wave to go all the way on the other end. But I saw, and I'm not going to name any names, but some of his teachers barely showed up. They barely showed up on the virtual learning. And so,
I mean, I think we didn't talk much about that problem with the virtual. Like, virtual is not bad itself. Virtual learning isn't. Just like in-person schooling isn't. Just like homeschooling isn't. Just like private schooling isn't. All of it can be bad. Like, if you don't do it the right way. The virtual thing, my kids were enjoying virtual more before the districts got involved. Once the district finally got their ship lined up and all the teachers trained and ready to go, once the kids started doing that, they hated it.
yeah.
Like providing resources that we matched and worksheets at them online without any instruction basically on how to do the worksheets, and it was frustrating them. There was no teaching going on. There was just a lot of like make work stuff happening. So
The other
Toya has a
thing I
comment.
wanted to say this too. The other thing is I think we need to really kind of keep things in perspective. Clearly, I'm not a doctor or a nurse. I have folks that I know. My cousins is a nurse and works up in Baltimore. And I have friends and family who are in the medical field or nurses and doctors. The thing of it is that I think the CDC has been clear the entire time that if you're healthy, even if you contract the virus, if you're healthy, you're not, most people are surviving. I think we need to kind of keep that in perspective. I think with the news and constant coverage of it, people are paralyzed with fear. And I personally can't live that way. Being paralyzed with fear a lot of times does actually depress your immune system. A lot of people's immune systems, if they don't have pre-existing conditions and if they're not elderly, it's winning. The immune system is actually winning against the virus. There's also this idea of herd immunity, building up antibodies, all of these different things. Again, like I said, I'm not a biologist or a doctor or a nurse, but I just also want people to have a healthy fear, but not a paralyzing fear. Children are not in the group of people that are at higher risk, according to the CDC and then according to medical professionals. I just wanted to remind people of that as well.
Well, I'm glad that you bring up that point because this is where every family is going to have to make decisions for themselves about how they feel about these things. The CDC has some pretty strong guidelines right now that the president is disagreeing with, and they're not backing down from them. Young people were much too confident about the fact that they weren't going to get it and that they weren't going to be infected, and now they're being infected at higher rates. Some of the fastest growing rates are in daycare centers. So whereas there was this idea
because
that
they couldn't close, and children are not going to keep on masks.
Well, for whatever reason, we were told in the beginning that wasn't going to be a problem, which is my point. My point is that we were told not to worry about that. That wasn't
Oh,
going
I
to be
don't
as
know
much
who
of a
told.
problem.
That's what they said in
Not,
Minnesota.
no, that's not. That's what they said nationally. What they
Oh,
said
okay.
nationally was that it was going to hurt old people, that it was going to affect old people, and that they were going to be the ones that were, at high risk.
Spread and dying is different. Like, of course, it's gonna spread if you're in close
Yeah.
proximity
Well,
and you're
this is
not
my
wearing
point.
a
Is like
mask.
they were worried. The only reason they were worried about. Yeah, and some kids are having they're becoming outbreak monkeys in some ways. Like in a family, you'll have whole families now that are getting it, and a lot of times it's coming through the kids, which you have to be very careful about. My only point in saying that is they are still not science and the medical profession are still not on top of this thing in ways, so anything can happen, but people are dying, and we are leading the world in number of cases. And Black people and people of color are the ones who are most at risk for multiple
Because we
reasons.
have our
One,
pre-existing conditions.
well, for many reasons. We
Yeah,
may have pre-existing conditions. We may be on the front lines. We
we are.
may live in places where the healthcare systems themselves are
So
deteriorated, right?
exactly.
Yeah, substandard or whatnot. So for whatever reason, we should have high. We can't be flippant about it. We have to have higher alert than the normal population because if you wanted to create something that would hurt us more than others,
Right.
this is a good one that we have to really pay attention to what the national science is telling us. And the national science is really telling us that they still don't have a handle on it. You're seeing second waves now pop up in places.
Well, that's because we didn't do a full shutdown. Our government did not do a full shutdown, and we also didn't support people sending out how much was the stimulus check? I didn't get one. That's not going to cover people.
You didn't get yours?
Yeah, but it's not enough.
Yeah.
Not to cover people's months of bills, and then you also didn't have state governments. We're in a bind, but I don't know.
On the stimulus, I will say this much, and that's a different show. But there were definitely a lot of people that were making more money now through the mix between unemployment or the mix between the stimulus money that they were getting and other aids and assistance than they were getting before. which became a problem for our politicians. They really wanted to argue about that point. But in saying all of this, it kind of leads back to the point, Zakiya, for me, which is if you have leaders who are bungling the health response, managing a pandemic, funding the systems like healthcare and education and other systems appropriately and staffing it appropriately and having staff that actually want to do the job on these three on this. I know you'll agree with me. Each of these things becomes a reason for historically marginalized people to be vigilant in their distrust that the system will work and get it right, no matter what we propose. Right. So I would imagine as an activist, you would be saying, well, fighting for these things isn't enough. You have to stay on top of them afterwards. You have to be there. You can't just activate for something, fight for it, and then not monitor it, not keep holding their feet to the fire. So let's say we do this with schools and we do get some kids going in. What do you think it looks like to be activist in terms of making sure that they get it right and that they're following through the right way and that we're putting the pressure on them to keep our kids safe?
I think this is the new frontier. Again, I maintain the fact that, we still need support. We need philanthropy to step up in areas where our politicians are not stepping up. There are some states that I believe did do some things right in terms of coronavirus. I believe Ohio was the first state to actually close schools. I believe the governor there made some, and he's, of Trump's party, and he's taken some heat from Trump for actually believing the science and trying to get ahead of this thing. But it's unfortunate because you're right. I think everything started to open up more. And so cases are rising really all over the country. And even in places that I thought that did in states that I thought that did handle the virus well. I think Maryland handled it, decently where I live. I think that, again, this is where, and I mentioned in the article, the advocacy has to be at the state and local level and the federal level. But when it comes to education, mostly state and local. I mean, we're still talking about Trump. But again, Arne Duncan clarified for the whole world with his tweet that 90% of funding and decisions come from the local and state level when it comes to education. So to me, that's where the advocacy has to be. I guess I'm privileged in some ways as well. I live in a suburban community where funding is not an issue. Our county executive just released the budget yesterday where he's not making any cuts to education, none, because everybody is reeling from the missed tax revenue that the shutdown caused. So there are going to have to be budget decisions, and this is where I think creativity and morality has to rise to the top. And this is where the activist has to be pushing for school to be an option. It has to be an option. I will never be a person to take off options from the table from people, from anybody. So to me, or we can just simply say, oh, well, the economy is open, but poor kids and essential worker kids, you can't have it both ways. You want to still go to the grocery store, but those essential workers got kids and families too. You want to still go to the restaurants. It's the people in Prince George's County are sitting down and eating in restaurants now. I haven't done that. I'm still just picking my stuff up and leaving. But but this is happening, and those workers have kids. There's no summer camps. Everything is online. I mean, it's my kids. Let me just tell you, my kids are tapped out. The other thing that we're not thinking about in terms of the children, at least from both of my children, I thought I would never hear this from my son, was that I miss school. I miss my friends. And we live in a community where a lot of his friends are just right here. But because of the virus and because of the fear, there's no like touching. There's no outside really playing, like, you're distancing. And like, while I don't agree with Trump, the people that he had on his panel, I listened to the full press conference. Some of that is relevant and real. We got to get past the personalities and the person sometimes. There's anxiety from isolation. We haven't even talked about that. I can say for me personally, it's been rough working from home and also trying to parent, even with help. And I'm married. I'm not a single mom. My husband has been amazing. I probably would. I'm admitting on your show nationally that I probably would have had some kind of anxiety medication or had to have some kind of medication to help me deal with everything from working if I was a single mom. I can't
I mean,
imagine what single parents.
doesn't it feel like in some ways though that that is a result of the total alienation that we're going through, not just about schools being open or closed. It's just
Yes,
even,
it's
I
total.
mean,
Right.
and it's going to follow us into schools. Like that's what I meant when I said the dystopian way that schools are being proposed to look in the fall are going to be depressing too. The kids aren't going to be able to do recess the way that they had been doing recess before. It's not going to be a social free for all the way that it had been. There's going to be social distancing, which means they're going to have to stay 6 feet apart from each other and all that stuff. So even those of
Kids
us
are
that are
not
getting
going to
little,
social distance. This
no, they
may
are. Yeah, they
they're not.
are. Yeah, they are, and they're going to get suspended if they don't.
That's what I'm going to talk about.
These are the
Yes,
realities because you know what, the teachers and the adults are going to be so health conscious about things that I think it personally, I think it's going to get very draconian in how they administrate the distancing between students and stop the spread and the germs and all that type of stuff. Because you know what, before all of this happened, teachers were very kind of germ phobic, period, already because kids. I mean, you have a whole building full of kids. Kids are bringing in all kinds of stuff from their homes or whatnot. So they were already doing a hand sanitizer or whatnot. But even the schools that are reopening in other places don't look anything close to what kids are used to in schools
are you
or
talking
had
about
been
in
used
other
to.
countries?
Well, just period everywhere where they're. I mean, the schools that are thinking about
There's no
reopening
schools
here
open in the
are looking
U.S.
to those. No, no, this is my point. The schools that are talking about reopening here are looking at schools all over the place to start their plans. So when they are putting out pictures now of what the classrooms here, what they're proposing here, are looking like, with the desks far apart from each other, the gear that some of them want to make the kids wear so that they don't like catch anything from each other, spread anything each other. It's looking pretty draconian in some ways, but I get it because they don't want the spread. They don't want a single school to become an incubator of disease, which could very easily happen. My only point in saying all that is I still feel like even with reopening the schools, there's going to be this sense of alienation and wanting to return to times when things were more normal, like when kids could just play. And those of us who are like even thinking about play dates and stuff like that now are having to be super inventive about the ways that it goes down. And it doesn't even look anything like it used to look. Like kids playing in parks and stuff together doesn't look, I mean, masked, and every 5 minutes you're making them like hand sanitize and stuff, whatever. I'm worried about it. I'm worried that our kids ever will get that sense of normalcy again because science has not figured this thing out yet. Like, and you and I and others, we're probably not going to be on planes anytime soon. We're probably not going to do conferences
There are people
anytime soon.
flying though.
So
No, I
they
know
are,
there are
and
people
apparently they're
flying.
getting better deals now too. Probably right. They're
Yeah,
probably like getting first class when
that's the problem. People are still
so,
doing everything. I guess it's me. If everything is going to be open, then the full economy is open, and then you don't have schools open. I don't see how people can jive. Um, Still going to restaurants, you're still going to grocery stores. Daycares are still open because essential
mhm.
workers, cops, and firefighters who have babies, they can't take their kids to work with them. It's just, I don't know. It's, yeah, I still think that they're either shut the economy down all the way or
Mhm.
you got to figure out how to have in person schools, period. That's it. Shut the economy
Yeah.
down all the way.
Well, you did
Everything that
say
can be virtual
uh,
because apparently because my thing is people are like, well, I don't go to the grocery store, I use Instacart, but ain't no robot delivering your food, there's still somebody driving it.
that's true. There's not a robot yet. There's probably one coming. There's not one yet, but there's probably one coming. But it's true, that's a living human being who is showing up at your door with those,
Exactly.
still with your pizza if
They
you
touch
order
your
pizza.
food, right?
If it's a pizza. Some of them, I'm not going to name names. Some of them are deep about their safety. They have masks and gloves and all that. Some of them, one or two that are well known across the country, are not. and people are showing up at your door all kinds of ways with your food. Um, um, do you sympathize with the teachers though who are really like right now thinking there's just no way like for me to go back in that building right now, there's
I
nothing,
sympathize with
to
everybody.
come.
Of course, I
Yeah.
sympathize with teachers, but to me, teachers, I sympathize with I'll get very personal. I have a cousin who has a son who has pre-existing conditions, but he's a nurse. Um,
Mm-hmm,
I
hmm.
think about them every single day. And I know that he has a routine. He as soon as he hits the door, he strips right there. He cleans himself. There's a routine. But I think about everybody. He's on the front line. So it's not like, am I gonna come in contact? I'm going into the belly of the beast of this thing, of
Hmm.
disease
Hmm.
every single
Hmm.
day. I think about doctors. I think about everybody. I probably have the most compassion for low wage workers who are still out here.
Hmm.
And,
Hmm.
and that's why I've been extra kind. I tip workers that we're not supposed to tip, and I'm not naming who I tip because thank you.
Hmm.
Thank you. I know you have to
Hmm.
do what you have
Hmm.
to do to feed your family. You don't want to be here. So of course, yes, I sympathize with teachers. I sympathize with everybody. But I also think that school is essential. To me, either we argue for a full shutdown of the country because some countries have done that. And if we know
Hmm.
we're not going to get that in the Trump administration, we're also not going to get that in the Biden administration. We need to be real about that.
Hmm.
Nobody,
Hmm.
this is the largest economy in the world. They're not going to do it, right?
Hmm.
So then, okay, they're not going to do it, and we know people still have to work. We're not arguing that firefighters don't have to work. We're not arguing that police officers. Some people are arguing to fund the police. We're not arguing that hospitals close. I, I don't know. To me, I feel like school is up there with hospitals. It's essential. It's essential not just for parents, but it's essential just for society in
Hmm.
general. It's an
Hmm.
integral part of society. And I feel like to me, this is a continuation in the devaluing of education in this country, Chris. To me, you and I have not even talked about philosophically. We
Hmm.
don't value education. And I'm not talking about black folks. We value it. But I think in terms, like we were talking about moral documents, when we look at the federal budget, you know how much they spend on military and cops and just criminalization and just all like this real dystopian shit versus what
Hmm.
they spend on education and healthcare and things that actually create a better, living situation for regular people. No, I, yeah, I think that we have to have a serious, because to me, the people who are arguing that schools can just be virtual is a continuation of devaluing the institution of education, in my opinion. It's a continuation of that
Well, I don't
philosophically.
agree with that. I mean, I don't agree with that. I mean, I think that there are people that really believe in virtual learning and actually believe that it's better, and there's a lot of people that don't believe in the public schools run by the government.
Right?
I mean, like just philosophically, don't. I'm one of those people that philosophically just has never been somebody who's been nostalgic about government running of anything. Not in
No,
this
but
country.
I think what I'm
Maybe in some
saying is
other
that
countries.
for people who are like, well, because people are sometimes just flip it. Well, there's a lot of things that you just go online. There are some people who are very flippant about it. Like, well, school is one of those things that you can just go online. I think New York's governor announced that schools, why do we need even like school buildings anymore? Like, let's get rid of it. And I'm saying no, that's not the
Mhm.
case for everybody. Some
Oh,
people
it's
are
definitely
arguing,
not for everybody.
no, yeah.
But this is what I think could happen though that has effects on us. Like first of all, I'm always looking out for whether the unintended
Same, me too.
consequences because it seems no matter what we try to do, that are ugly, to help marginalize and oppress people, it almost seems like you always got to be like super suspicious. I'm just being suspicious here in this conversation. That's 100% of what you're getting from me in terms of my energy is suspicion about
I know
everybody,
you, Chris.
suspicion about everything because it seems like everything from welfare to SNAP to food stamps to education and schools and Head Start and programs of all sorts. If you are not suspicious by now about the unintended consequences of the way that people design these things, like you just have not been watching So there's a healthy skepticism about how all this goes down. Now, in a perfect world, I actually could see like all this stuff, like maybe somebody should make me czar, because if I was czar, I could see how I could make all this stuff like work in my mind. I still think there might be some unintended consequences. But I mean, listen, with this administration pushing for things that feel like a rush back to schooling over the objections of their medical health professionals, their national leading health professionals and scientists.
The American Pediatric Association is a pushing for kids to go back to school.
They're pushing on the basis of social isolation not being good for kids. They're not pushing it based on the fact that scientists are telling you might die from a virus that is spreading in the United States because we have bonehead politicians. Right?
Yeah,
they're
but
not
I think you saying that might die is actually a stretch. I mean, kids, we need to look at the actual numbers. No, I'm serious. We need to look at the actual numbers. The vast majority of people are not dying from this virus. We got to stop perpetuating that. I'm not, and I actually had a family member, a distant family member, died very early on from the coronavirus, but he also had underlying conditions like asthma. He had breathing issues. So I have people in my family who, and they were mostly men, who fought it. I mean, it took months, but he's back now. And now I have another aunt who's I'm actually very close to in Alabama who has it, and she has no symptoms. The fact remains of the 3 people that I know personally in my family who have contracted it, there's been 1 death, and that's been consistent with what CDC and other health professionals said. If you have underlying conditions, then it can be fatal. But for the vast majority of people, even if you contract the virus, it is not fatal. It's not. Oh, Chris, I think you might be frozen. Are you still there? Yeah, I think you're frozen. I can't hear you. Yeah, unfortunately, Chris is he'll probably have to hop back in. Again, this is another issue with the broadband. You know, people who don't, have access to it, have access to good broadband. This is the kind of learning situation. If we're saying everything can just be virtual or just can be online, I think people who have been dealing with this technology for the last couple of months can tell you that it's certainly not a panacea. And it's certainly not a replacement for in-person learning. So anyway, I just think that that's really critical and important to mention. Hopefully Chris can get back on and join us here pretty soon. I actually have to hop because I'm going to be getting on another call here shortly. Are you back, Chris?
See, broadband.
Broadband. This the panacea y'all want. Just do it online.
Well, no. See, this is where you and I could go back and forth again. Let's just trust the government, because they wired the country since in the last 30 years. They did such a good job of wiring the country up.
Actually, private companies like Comcast has wired us, not the government.
The government paid to actually have my area and areas like mine wired over periods of years. And since Bill Clinton, as a matter of fact, there's been a national fund, government fund, to get all of us wired. We were all going to be wired by 2000.
Wow.
Something like that. Government, for y'all that believe in government, do it. I know you ain't one of those. I'm not saying that about you. Like, listen, I know we got to wrap soon. I got to
hop to another call.
We're not just,
join the virtual town hall.
We're not just a drink to screen as well. Right. Tell people about the town hall today that you're having.
So it'll be here on the Citizen Ed platform. It's going to be a panel of experts. We're going to hear from a student who's also my son, and we're going to hear from a teacher,
Ooh.
an educator, talking about reimagining school safety. And this is a place I believe that we can make good arguments to make a divestment from policing and harm and actually create schools that are not hard and punitive, but
Mm.
schools that are actually have welcoming school environments for young people and parents. So we're going to have a robust conversation from 12 to 2 p.m. Eastern Time here on the Citizen Ed platform. And this is a part of our town hall series in seeking child justice. And this topic is about reimagining school safety. So make sure you guys get on. It's in less than an hour at 12 o'clock.
All right. Well, Zakiya, I know you got to jump, so go ahead and jump. I'll give my final word here. I will see you soon on your town hall. Have a great town hall. Thank you
Thank
for
you.
joining me today, too. I appreciate you. And as always, challenge my thinking. So we'll see you
Thank
soon
you.
on the other side there.
Absolutely. All right. Take
Thanks,
care.
Zakiya. Um, to my listeners and viewers and watchers and people who have been faithful with us and come to this every day and help us make a better show, here's my final word on what we're talking about today. I think Zakiya is right in saying that public education, public schools are essential in ways that we don't pay attention to. It's more than just educating the kids. They actually are part of the economic stability of families that do shift work, that service work, frontline workers, families that rely upon a place to put their kids every day where their kids will be safe and have fun, be educated, be social, and all of those things. My pushback on the issue is that when we expect school districts and governments to get things right, when our health and well-being is on the hook for them getting things right, we're in real trouble. We don't have a lot of evidence that tells us that they deserve all of our trust in these situations. This pandemic couldn't be a clearer, I think, um, a clear example of where we need to be vigilant about our whether or not we trust our government to get things right. We have uh, not just 3 million deaths. We have many people who are ill. We still have health services that are being taxed to the point where they are breaking. We still have untold stories about what people are suffering even when they don't die from this. And we have politicized the issue to the point where we can't even expect our elected people to work together to make things safe for us. If you look at Canada and some other places in the world, they have actually been able to so-called flatten their curve, contain the coronavirus, and their left and right wing political people have worked together, and they've worked together with the scientists and with medical professionals. We have a hot soup in the United States of incompetence, petty politics, politicians who can't be trusted to do the right thing, only do the thing that will get them elected and reelected the next time. So imagine that being the basis for handing our kids over again, saying in the fall we want to do what Donald Trump wants us to do is demand that the schools reopen so the economy will be fine. I think most likely so that he can have a better chance of being reelected, and not care about what the teachers are telling us about their worries and concerns about the health and well-being of themselves and our kids. Not pay attention to the fact that the science still is not working in our favor. Not pay attention to the fact that in 150 years, public schools and public education have not been able to implement most things well. So to have them try to implement something that is life and death for many people, and to start that with the kids who are the most needy, because those, let's be frankly, are the kids that will need to go back first before everybody else. If it's just on the basis of need to go back, like need to be somewhere. So I don't disagree with the fact that public schools play an essential role within communities. Some schools do. Um, I do want to end just by saying those families that have privilege, like my family have some privileges, are not going to be the first to run. We're not going to be the fools who rush in to put our kids in places where the safety is undetermined and where we have to trust in government just goodwill towards our kids. And I don't think that any amount of activism is going to make me a more trusting person right away. I believe we should all be activists around this. I don't think that any amount of activism is going to make this all okay in the immediate future. Science is not working for us right now. Neither is politics. Our systems are degraded. It would take a lot of earning the trust of the public and voters and taxpayers, again, for politicians to even be in a position of asking us to trust them on these things. As always, I thank you all for watching every day, for bringing your comments, your thoughts. Sorry about the technical interruptions that we've had the last couple of days. I'm working it out, trying to think it through about how we address some of that. So appreciate you all. You can always reach me, Christopher@activist.com, if you want to send me an email or a message. And as always, you guys are amazing. I appreciate you.